They thought the joke was on me when they mocked my dress, clinking their champagne glasses like they owned the world. But as I watched my brother's fiancée sneer, I gripped the phone in my pocket. They did not know I had bought their parent company 14 days ago. If you think being laughed at is humiliating, wait until the person you called a loser fires you in front of 200 guests. My name is Hannah Whitmore, and standing in the archway of the Wentworth Mansion ballroom, I felt less like a guest and more like a ghost haunting my own life. The air in Charleston was heavy that night, a thick velvet blanket of humidity that even the aggressive industrial air conditioning could not entirely banish. Inside, the atmosphere was different but equally suffocating. It smelled of heavy lilies, expensive beeswax polish, and the metallic tang of desperate ambition. I adjusted the cuff of my navy blazer. It was a simple piece, tailored to fit perfectly but devoid of the flashy labels that the rest of the room seemed to wear like armor. I had learned a long time ago that true power does not need to scream to be heard. Tonight, however, silence was not just a preference, it was a strategy. The engagement party for my brother, Logan, was in full swing. It was the kind of event where the champagne flowed not because people were thirsty, but because an empty glass meant you had stopped consuming. And in this circle, consumption was the only religion that mattered. I scanned the room, my eyes moving with the practiced precision of a hawk hunting in tall grass. The lighting was low, amber and gold, designed to flatter aging skin and make cheap jewelry sparkle with more authority than it deserved. There were at least 150 people here. I recognized faces from the local business journals and the social pages of the newspaper, the kind of people who smiled with their teeth but never with their eyes. Then I saw them, the Harringtons. Bruce Harrington was standing near the bar, holding court with a group of men who looked like they were worried about their quarterly earnings. Bruce was a tall man who had once been handsome before greed had softened his jawline. He was laughing too loud, his hand clapping the shoulder of a banker with a force that looked more like a threat than a greeting. Beside him was his wife, Diana. She was a vision in emerald silk, her neck draped in diamonds that I suspected were leased rather than owned. She moved with a frantic energy, her eyes darting around the room as if she were expecting the police to burst through the doors at any moment. They had the distinct, acrid scent of people who were running out of time. And then there was Camille. My future sister-in-law was standing in the center of the room, exactly where she believed the universe revolved. She was beautiful. I could admit that objectively. She had the kind of polished, high-maintenance beauty that required a team of 3 people to assemble. Her dress was white, a preview of the wedding to come, cut low enough to be daring but expensive enough to be classy. She was holding Logan's arm, but she wasn't leaning on him for support. She was anchoring him, keeping him in place like a prop in her personal stage play. I took a breath and stepped off the carpeted threshold onto the hardwood floor. The moment I entered the main circulation of the room, the temperature seemed to drop around me. It was subtle at first. A conversation near the door paused. A head turned. Then, the whispers started. I kept my chin high, my face a mask of polite disinterest. I walked toward the bar, not because I wanted a drink, but because it was the best vantage point to see the exits. "Oh, look who decided to grace us with her presence," a voice cut through the ambient noise. It was Camille. She had spotted me instantly. It was almost impressive how attuned she was to anything that might threaten her spotlight. She detached herself from Logan and glided toward me, trailing a wake of expensive perfume that smelled like gardenias and money. A few of her bridesmaids, girls who looked like carbon copies of her in pastel shades, followed close behind. "Hannah," Camille said, her voice sweet and thick like molasses laced with arsenic. "I honestly did not think you would make it. Logan said you were busy with whatever it is you do, knitting, or is it tutoring now?" The girls behind her giggled. It was a small, sharp sound, like glass breaking. "It is good to see you, Camille," I said, my voice steady. "The room looks lovely." Camille tilted her head, her eyes raking over my outfit. She looked at my sensible heels, my unadorned wrists, and the lack of a designer handbag. Her smile widened, showing perfect veneers. "It is a bit formal for a Tuesday casual, isn't it?" she said, loud enough for the table of investors nearby to hear. "But I suppose it is sweet. You look like you tried very hard. It gives off such a charming, rustic vibe, like a country cousin visiting the big city for the first time." The insult landed exactly where she wanted it to. It painted me as the outsider, the failure, the poor relation who did not know the dress code of the elite, to everyone within earshot. I was Hannah the charity case, the sister who could not quite keep up with the meteoric rise of the Whitmore and Harrington Union. I did not flinch. I did not blush. I simply looked at her. "I am comfortable," I said, "and I would not have missed seeing Logan tonight." "Right," Camille said, dismissing me with a wave of her manicured hand. "Well, try not to stand near the catering entrance, sweetie. The servers might confuse you for one of the temp staff, and we would not want you to have to work for your dinner, although I hear you are used to that." She laughed again, and this time, the cruelty was not even hidden. It was right there on the surface, confident and jagged. She turned her back on me, dismissing me as a non-threat, and returned to her admirers. I watched her walk away, and that was when I saw it. My breath hitched in my throat, a physical reaction I could not suppress. Fastened to the back of Camille's dress, acting as a clasp for the delicate lace overlay, was a brooch. It was a sapphire, surrounded by a halo of small, old-cut diamonds, set in tarnished silver that had been polished to a high shine. It was my grandmother's brooch. It was the specific piece of jewelry that Nana had promised to me on her deathbed. It had gone missing from my mother's jewelry box 3 years ago. My mother had claimed it was lost during a move, that it had just vanished into the ether, and now, here it was, pinned to the back of a woman who looked at me like I was dirt. The rage that flared in my chest was white-hot. It demanded that I march over there, rip the brooch off her dress, and scream at the top of my lungs. It wanted me to overturn the tables, to smash the crystal glasses, to demand justice for the 1,000 small cuts they had inflicted on me over the years. But I did not move. I forced my hands to unclench at my sides. I forced my heart rate to slow down. If I reacted now, if I made a scene, I would play right into their hands. I would be the crazy sister, the jealous spinster, the unstable woman who ruined the perfect night. They would escort me out, and Logan would look at me with that sad, disappointed puppy dog expression, and the Harringtons would win. They wanted a reaction. I would give them a reckoning, but not yet. I turned away from the group and walked toward the perimeter of the room. I needed to focus. I needed to separate the emotion from the mission. I was not here to be accepted. I was here because my intuition, honed by a decade of navigating shark-infested corporate waters, told me that this marriage was not a union. It was a merger, and a fraudulent one at that. I found a quiet spot near a decorative pillar and took a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray. From here, I had a clear view of the entire floor. I noted the security team. There were 4 of them, dressed in black suits, standing at the cardinal points of the room. They looked bored, hired muscle from a local agency, likely not paid enough to care about anything other than a physical altercation. I looked toward the back of the room, near the technical booth where the audio and visual equipment was set up. A man was standing there, holding a tablet and speaking into a headset. He was wearing a headset and a sharp black suit. It was Gavin Holt, the event manager for the venue. I had never met Gavin in person, but I knew his file. I knew he was meticulous, professional, and discreet. As I watched him, he looked up. His eyes scanned the room and locked onto mine. He did not smile. He did not wave. He simply gave a microscopic nod, a dip of the chin so slight that if I had blinked, I would have missed it. He knew who I was. Not Hannah the country bumpkin, not Hannah the poor sister. He knew the name on the contract that had bought the parent company of this hotel chain 14 days ago. He knew that technically. He was looking at the woman who signed his paycheck. That single nod was the only validation I needed. It was a secret tether to reality, a reminder that the play acting out in front of me was just that, a play, and I was the one who owned the theater. I took a sip of water and let the cold liquid settle my stomach. I watched Bruce Harrington check his watch for the third time in 10 minutes. I watched Diana Harrington smooth her skirt with trembling hands. I watched a young man in a gray suit slip out the side door with a large leather satchel, moving with a haste that suggested he was not just going to the restroom. They were nervous, beneath the veneer of wealth and celebration. The Harringtons were vibrating with anxiety. Hannah? I turned to see Logan standing there. My brother looked handsome in his tuxedo, but up close, I could see the strain around his eyes. He looked like a man who was trying very hard to convince himself that he was happy. "Hey, Logan," I said, softening my expression. "I am glad you came," he said, and he sounded relieved. "Camille, she can be a lot. She is just stressed about everything being perfect. Do not let her get to you, okay?" "I never do," I lied. "She just wants us to be a family," Logan said, reciting lines that sounded rehearsed. "She thinks you and Mom, well, she thinks you guys have friction because you are jealous of the success. But I told her that is crazy. You are content with your simple life, and that is fine. Hannah, really, I am proud of you for making it work on your own." He squeezed my shoulder, a gesture meant to be comforting but which felt incredibly patronizing. He truly believed it. He believed the narrative they had fed him, that I was the struggling, simple sister who needed their pity. "I am happy for you, Logan," I said, choosing my words carefully. "I just want to make sure you are safe." He laughed, a short, bewildered sound. "Safe? Hannah, I am at a party in a 5-star hotel. I am about to marry the woman of my dreams. I am the safest man in the world." Over his shoulder, I saw Camille watching us. Her eyes were narrowed, her hand touching the stolen brooch at her neck. She looked possessive, predatory. "Go back to your fiancé," I said gently. "They are about to start the speeches." Logan smiled, the easy, oblivious smile of a man walking off a cliff. "Thanks. Hannah, try to have fun. Grab some lobster. It costs a fortune. Might as well enjoy it." He walked back to her. I watched Camille whisper something in his ear, and he laughed, looking back at me with a pitying shake of his head. I set my glass down on a high table. The condensation was cold against my fingertips. Tonight was not about fun. It was not about lobster. It was about the fact that my brother was the mark in a long con, and the people running it had made the fatal mistake of assuming that because I was quiet, I was weak. They wanted me to be the background character. They wanted me to be the scenery. I smoothed the front of my blazer and checked the time. It was 8:15. The speeches would start in 45 minutes. I had 45 minutes to turn this party into a courtroom. The ambient jazz music seemed to swell, drowning out the murmurs of the crowd, but it could not drown out the click of my mother's heels as she approached me. Elaine Whitmore moved through the room with the grace of a frigate seeking a port in a storm. She spotted me standing near the pillar, and her smile tightened. It was not a smile of greeting. It was the grimace of a handler realizing her unruly animal had escaped its cage. She did not say hello. Instead, she reached out and took hold of my upper arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her manicured nails digging into the fabric of my blazer just enough to be felt, but not enough to leave a mark. It was a perfect metaphor for her parenting style. "Hannah," she hissed, her voice pitched low so that the passing waiter with the tray of crab cakes would not hear. "What are you doing standing here like a statue? You are making people uncomfortable." "I am drinking water, Mother," I replied, keeping my voice level. I did not realize hydration was a social offense. Elaine let out a short, sharp breath through her nose. She pulled me slightly to the side, angling her body to block me from the view of the Harringtons across the room. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my shoes, my trousers, my lack of jewelry. It was an inspection, and I had failed before I had even started. "Look at you," she said, shaking her head. "This is the most important night of your brother's life, and you show up looking like you are going to a parent-teacher conference. Could you not have bought a dress? Something with color? You just do not fit in here. Hannah, you never have." The words were old, worn smooth by decades of repetition. I had heard them when I was 10 and preferred reading to ballet. I had heard them when I was 18 and chose a state university over the finishing school she wanted. I had heard them when I started my first business instead of marrying a doctor. "I am here to support Logan," I said. "My clothes do not change that." "Your attitude does," she snapped. "Listen to me. The Harringtons are important people. Bruce is a titan in this city. Do not embarrass Logan with your sullenness. Do not bring up your little job. Do not talk about your apartment. Just smile, nod, and try to look like you belong to a successful family for once. Be grateful they even invited you." She smoothed the lapel of my jacket with a forceful brush of her hand, as if trying to wipe away my entire personality. "I am asking you to know your place, Hannah," she added, her eyes locking onto mine. "Tonight is about the future. Do not drag us back into the mud with you." Before I could respond, before I could tell her that the mud she was so afraid of was the only thing solid in her life, a booming voice interrupted us. "There are my two favorite women." It was Logan. He bounced toward us, his face flushed with adrenaline and expensive scotch. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders, pulling me into a side hug that felt more like a headlock. It was performative affection, done for the benefit of the audience, not for the sister he was holding. "Mom, isn't this place incredible?" Logan asked, gesturing wide with his free hand. "Camille picked everything. The flowers alone cost $15,000. Can you believe that? 15 grand for flowers that will die tomorrow. That is the kind of class we are marrying into." Elaine beamed, her face transforming instantly into a mask of adoration. "It is stunning, darling, just stunning. Camille has exquisite taste." Logan looked down at me, squeezing my shoulder. "You know, Hannah, looking at all this, it makes me think about how different we are. Remember when we were kids? You were always saving your allowance, counting pennies in that little jar. You were so worried about everything, and look at me. I just let things happen, and look where I landed." He laughed, a carefree sound that grated against my nerves. "I remember," I said quietly. "I remembered because, while he was letting things happen, I was the one fixing his homework, covering for his broken windows, and later, bailing him out of credit card debt when he maxed out his first limit in college." "You were always the serious one," Logan continued, oblivious to the tension radiating off me. "The little worker bee. That is why we love you. Though, someone has to keep track of the boring stuff, right? But tonight, Hannah, look around. This is what winning looks like. No spreadsheets, just champagne." He did not mean to be cruel. That was the tragedy of Logan Whitmore. He was not malicious. He was just blind. He had been raised in a spotlight held steady by our mother, and he had never once looked into the shadows to see who was holding the ladder for him. He genuinely believed that his luck was talent, and that my caution was a character flaw. "I am happy if you are happy, Logan," I said, trying to find a connection with him, a real one. "But are you happy? Really?" He blinked, his smile faltering for a microsecond. "Of course I am. Why wouldn't I be? Camille is amazing. Her dad is going to bring me on as a VP next month. It is all set." "A VP of what?" I asked. "Business development, strategy, you know, the big picture stuff." He waved his hand dismissively. "Bruce says I have the right image for the brand." The right image, not the right skills, not the right experience, the right image. They were buying his face, his name, and his pliability. Before I could press him further, Camille appeared. She did not walk up to us. She materialized, inserting herself between Logan and me with the fluidity of water. "Logan, darling, the photographer needs us by the cake," she said, placing a hand on his chest. She glanced at me, her eyes flat. "Oh, Hannah, I am so glad I caught you. I had to make a tiny adjustment to the seating chart." "Is that so?" I asked. "Yes, well, table 4 was just getting too crowded with the senator's family, so I had to move you," she said, her voice dripping with faux apology. "I put you at table 19. It is in the back. Near the terrace doors. It will be much quieter there. You hate crowds, right? I thought you would appreciate the privacy. Table 19, the overflow table. The table for the distant cousins and the people they felt obligated to invite but did not want to see. It was a deliberate move to push me to the fringe, to make me physically small in the room. That is very thoughtful of you, I said, my tone dry. I try, she said, linking her arm through Logan's. Come on, sweetie. We cannot keep the press waiting. Logan started to turn, but he paused. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. Hold on. I want to show Hannah that photo of the villa we looked at for the honeymoon. It is insane. Hun, you have to see the pool. He swiped at his screen, fumbling slightly. He tapped an app, opening his photo gallery. He held the phone out toward me. Look at this, he said, grinning. I leaned in to look at the screen. It was a photo of a stunning cliffside property in Italy. But as I looked, a banner notification slid down from the top of the screen, obscuring the blue water of the pool. It was a text message. The sender was listed simply as Bruce. The message was short. It read, "Keep the timeline. Do not let the sister interfere." My blood ran cold. It was on the screen for 3 seconds before it vanished, but the words were burned into my retinas. Keep the timeline. This was not just about a wedding. This was an operation. There was a schedule, a deadline, and I was identified as the obstacle. The sister, not Hannah, the sister, an object to be managed, a variable to be eliminated. Logan did not see it. He was too busy pointing at the patio furniture in the photo. Can you imagine drinking coffee there every morning? I looked up from the phone to his face. He looked so hopeful. He looked like a child showing his mother a drawing, desperate for approval. He had no idea he was being shepherded into a slaughterhouse. It looks expensive, I said, my voice barely a whisper. It is, Logan laughed. But Bruce is handling it. Wedding gift. Logan! Camille's voice was sharp now. She tugged at his arm, her nails digging into his tuxedo jacket. She had seen me looking at the phone. She knew. Her eyes met mine, and for a second, the mask slipped. There was panic there, but it was quickly covered by aggression. We need to go. Now. Okay, Logan said, pocketing the phone. Catch you later. Hannah, try the shrimp. He let her drag him away. I stood there, the noise of the party rushing back into my ears like a breaking wave. My mother stepped back into my line of sight. She had been watching the interaction, but she had missed the text. She had only seen her son walking away. See, she said, gesturing vaguely after them. They are a power couple. They have a schedule to keep. Do not linger. Hannah, if you are going to sulk, maybe you should just leave. No one would blame you. It is a long drive back to wherever you are living now. She wanted me gone. Camille wanted me gone. Bruce wanted me gone. The text message replayed in my mind. Keep the timeline. If I left now, whatever they were planning would happen. Logan would sign whatever papers they put in front of him. He would legally bind himself to a sinking ship, or worse, he would become the scapegoat for their crimes. They needed him for something specific, and they needed it done fast. I looked at my mother. She was adjusting her diamond earring, looking past me at the crowd, desperate to be seen by anyone other than her disappointment of a daughter. I am not leaving, Mother, I said. She frowned, looking at me with genuine confusion. Excuse me? I said I'm not leaving, I repeated, my voice gaining strength. I haven't heard the speeches yet, and I think I'm going to stay for the cake. I hear it is worth the wait. You are being difficult on purpose, she sighed, turning her back on me. Fine, just stay out of the way. She walked off to greet a woman in a red dress, her laugh tinkling artificially through the air. I stood alone near the pillar. The isolation they had tried to force on me suddenly felt different. It was no longer a punishment. It was a vantage point. I looked toward the main stage where the microphone stand was being set up. That was where the seal would happen. That was where Bruce would announce the merger of families, the merger of assets, the final trap snapping shut around my brother's neck. I checked my watch. the hands seemed to move slower now. I had been prepared to be the embarrassing relative. I had been prepared to be the wallflower. But they had made a mistake. They had made it tactical. They had confirmed that my presence was a threat to their timeline. And I was going to be the delay they never saw coming. I smoothed my blazer again, but this time, the gesture felt like preparing for battle. I turned and walked toward table 19, not to hide, but to wait. The country cousin was about to become the most dangerous person in the room. I decided to retreat from table 19 not because I felt out of place, but because the air in the ballroom had become stiflingly hot. The scent of heavy perfumes and roasted meat was beginning to churn in my stomach. I needed a moment of silence, a tactical pause to recalibrate before the main event began. I slipped out through a side archway that led to the gallery corridor, a long, narrow hall lined with portraits of dead tycoons who had built Charleston from the ground up. The noise of the party faded instantly, replaced by the hum of the climate control system and the soft thud of my heels on the runner rug. I was halfway down the hall, aiming for a small alcove near the library, when a shadow detached itself from the wall. It was Camille. She had not been following me. She had been waiting for me. It was an ambush. She stepped into my path, blocking the only exit. The sweet, vapid smile she wore for the cameras was gone. In its place was a look of cold, hard calculation. She looked less like a bride and more like a liquidation specialist evaluating a distressed asset. "Going somewhere?" she asked. Her voice was light, but it carried a weight that pressed against my chest. "Just finding a restroom. Camille," I said, keeping my hands unclasping at my sides. I did not realize I needed a hall pass. She laughed, a dry sound that did not reach her eyes. She took a step closer, invading my personal space. She smelled of champagne and something sharper, like hairspray and anxiety. "You know, Hannah," she began, tilting her head as if studying a particularly ugly insect. "I have been hearing some interesting things from your mother. She tells me you send money home every month. What is it? $500? 1,000? I did not blink. "I help out where I can." "It is pathetic." Camille spat the word out. "Mom says you treat it like some grand gesture, like you are the savior keeping the lights on. But let's be honest, sweetie. You are not doing it for them. You are doing it for yourself. You are throwing pennies at them to prove you are not a total failure. You are trying to buy a seat at the table because you know you do not have the talent to earn one." The accusation was specific and designed to hurt. She was twisting my financial support, the money that had paid for my father's heart medication and my mother's car repairs, into an act of desperate ego. It was a narrative she had clearly crafted with my mother over mimosas, laughing at the daughter who worked too hard for too little. "Is that what you think?" I asked softly. "It is what I know," she countered, stepping even closer. Her face was inches from mine. "And that is why I am going to give you some friendly advice. Do not come to the wedding." I raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," she hissed. "Make up an excuse. Get sick. Have a work emergency. I do not care. But do not show up. You are a drag. Hannah, you are a reminder of everything Logan is trying to leave behind. He is entering a new world now, my world. And frankly, you do not fit the aesthetic." She paused, waiting for me to argue, to cry, to beg. She wanted a fight. She wanted me to scream so she could play the victim again. I gave her nothing. I simply stood there, my face a blank canvas. I breathed in slowly, letting the silence stretch between us like a rubber band about to snap. My silence unnerved her. I saw a flicker of irritation twitch in her cheek. People like Camille are used to resistance. They feed on it. When they meet a void, they tend to overfill it with their own insecurities. "Look," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was far more terrifying than her shouting. "This isn't just about a party. Logan has a role to play, a very specific role. We have structured everything around him coming on board. He is the fresh face, the clean slate." She was talking too much. The adrenaline of the confrontation was making her sloppy. "He loves you," I said, throwing out a lure. "Of course he does." She dismissed the sentiment with a wave of her hand. But love doesn't sign audit reports. Hannah, we need someone who the board trusts implicitly because he is too stupid to be corrupt. Logan is perfect. He smiles, he signs, and he doesn't ask questions about the back-end logistics. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my expression frozen. She had just admitted it. Logan wasn't a partner. He was a liability shield. He was the clean slate meant to sign off on whatever dirty laundry the Harringtons were trying to wash. "He is my brother," I said, my voice deliberately flat. "He trusts you." "And that is why it is going to work," Camille said, her eyes gleaming with a manic intensity. "So do not ruin this. Do not whisper poison in his ear. Just stay away. We just need to get past the announcement phase. Once the merger is public and the initial filings are locked in, everything will be fine. We just need to get through the next 48 hours without any drama." The announcement phase. There it was. The deadline. They were on a clock. They weren't just rushing the wedding. They were rushing a corporate filing. They needed Logan's name on a document before a specific regulatory window closed or opened. "So," she said, smoothing the front of her white dress, regaining her composure, "we have an understanding. You disappear, and Logan gets to be a king. You stay, and I will make sure you are so humiliated you will wish you were dead." She didn't wait for an answer. She turned on her heel, her white dress swishing around her ankles, and marched back toward the ballroom, convinced she had just cowed the country sister into submission. I stood alone in the hallway for a full minute, processing the data. Sign audit reports, clean slate, initial filings. They were going to frame him. They were going to use his clean credit and his naive trust to absorb the blow for whatever financial toxic waste Bruce Harrington was hiding. My phone buzzed in my pocket, startling me. I pulled it out. It was a text from Logan. "Logie. Hey, where did you go? Look, I don't know why, but I feel weird. Bruce keeps introducing me to these guys as the new signatory, and Camille's mom just asked me for my social security number for the honeymoon tickets. It feels off. Am I just cold feet?" I stared at the screen. He was waking up. The survival instinct that had been dormant in him for 30 years was finally twitching, but it was too late for him to back out gracefully. If he tried to leave now, they would guilt him, threaten him, or worse, forge his consent. He needed a shield. I typed a reply, my fingers moving with precision. "Me. Do not sign anything, not a napkin, not a receipt. Wait for the speeches. Stay put." I sent it and watched the delivery status change to delivered. I put the phone back in my pocket. The trembling in my hands had stopped. The anger that had threatened to consume me earlier had crystallized into something cold and sharp. I was done being the sister. I was done being the observer. Camille thought she had cornered a scared rabbit in the hallway. She had no idea she had just handed the keys to the cage to a wolf. I turned back toward the ballroom. The music was louder now, a crescendo building toward the climax of the evening. They were preparing for the speeches. Bruce was probably gargling scotch to lubricate his lies. I walked back into the light, my stride longer, my posture straighter. I wasn't going to make a scene with tears or screams. I wasn't going to throw a drink in Camille's face. That was amateur hour. I was going to wait for them to build their tower of lies, brick by brick, right in front of everyone, and then, when they were standing on top of it, waving to the crowd, I was going to pull the foundation out from under them with a single sheet of paper. I caught the eye of the event manager, Gavin, across the room. He was adjusting a microphone stand on the stage. He saw me enter and tapped his earpiece. The stage was set. The players were in position. I walked to table 19 and sat down. I unfolded my napkin and placed it on my lap. I looked at the empty stage where my family's destruction was scheduled to take place at 9 o'clock. I had 15 minutes to prepare the execution. I sat at table 19, the exile table, and for the first time that evening, I felt a sense of calm settle over me. To the rest of the room, I was the rejected sister, sulking over a plate of cold asparagus, but in reality, I had just turned Table 19 into a mobile command center. The time for emotion was over. Camille's threat in the hallway had clarified everything. This was not a family dispute. This was a hostile takeover attempt of my brother's life, and I was the counterintelligence unit. I unlocked my phone, dimming the screen brightness to the lowest setting. I did not open Instagram or Facebook. I opened my encrypted messaging app. First, I selected the contact for Marla Klein. Marla was not just a legal aid. She was a weaponized research engine in a pencil skirt. I had hired her 3 years ago to handle due diligence for my acquisitions, and she had a terrifying talent for finding the skeletons that people thought they had buried in concrete. My thumbs moved across the glass with practiced speed. Target: Bruce and Diana Harrington. Entity: Harrington Global Solutions. I need a full litigation search. Federal and state. Focus on fraud, breach of contract, and settlements involving non-disclosure agreements. I need documents that are admissible in court. Do not give me rumors. Give me stamped filings. You have 20 minutes. I hit send. I knew Marla would not ask why. She would not ask how. She would just hunt. Next, I navigated to Noah Mercer. Noah was my forensic accountant. He saw the world in grids and vectors. If a penny was missing from a balance sheet in London, Noah could tell you which coffee shop in Seattle it had been spent at. I hesitated for a second, then typed, Noah, I need an immediate cash flow analysis on the Harrington accounts. Specifically, look for a Ponzi structure. Look for money moving from investor A to pay off investor B. Check for shell companies registered in Delaware or the Caymans within the last 6 months. I need the money trail, and I need it to be undeniable. If the ink is wet, I want to know. I sent the message. Finally, I contacted Tessa Vance. Tessa was my director of risk and compliance. She was the gatekeeper who ensured that my holding company, the massive umbrella corporation that nobody at this party knew I owned, stayed clean. Tessa, run a vendor cross-reference. Check if Harrington Global Solutions is currently a third-party contractor for any of our subsidiaries. Specifically, check for access privileges to our internal financial servers. I suspect an unauthorized penetration attempt via social engineering. The entry point is likely a new executive hire named Logan Whitmore. I put the phone face down on the tablecloth. The battery was at 82%. I took a sip of water, my eyes scanning the room. The party was reaching its peak volume. A jazz band was playing a frenetic cover of a pop song, and the laughter was loud and brittle. But beneath the noise, the tension at the head table was palpable. Bruce Harrington was not acting like a proud father-in-law. He was checking his phone every 30 seconds. He would pull it from his pocket, glance at the screen, frown, and shove it back. His leg was bouncing under the table, shaking the silverware. Diana Harrington was worse. She was smiling, but her hand kept drifting to her throat, touching the heavy diamond necklace she wore. It was a nervous tic, but it looked specific. She was not just touching it. She was checking the clasp. She was making sure it was secure. It was the behavior of someone who was wearing their liquidity around their neck. My phone buzzed against the table. One vibration. It was Marla. Initial scan complete. 3 civil suits filed in the last 90 days. All settled out of court. Sealed. However, I found a piercing the corporate veil motion from a creditor in Florida. They are alleging that Bruce is using company funds for personal assets. I am pulling the exhibits now. Another buzz. Noah. Hannah, this is a mess. It is a classic churn. They are moving the same $50,000 between 4 different accounts to make it look like $200,000 in assets. They are liquidating. I see massive withdrawals initiated 48 hours ago. They are draining the operating accounts. I felt a cold chill slide down my spine. They were not just trying to use Logan. They were cashing out. They were gutting their own company, taking every cent they could steal, and they needed a fall guy to be left holding the empty bag when the regulators came knocking. I looked at Logan. He was laughing at something Camille whispered, completely unaware that he was sitting next to an arsonist who had already lit the match. I needed one more piece of the puzzle. I needed control of the room. I stood up and smoothed my blazer. I picked up my clutch and walked toward the back of the room, moving along the perimeter where the shadows were deepest. I made my way to the audiovisual booth. Gavin Holt was standing behind the mixing board, monitoring the levels on a digital display. He saw me approaching and stepped out of the booth to meet me. He did not look at my clothes. He looked at my eyes. "Ms. Whitmore," he said. His voice was low, professional. "Gavin," I said, keeping my voice steady. "In about 20 minutes, there is going to be a shift in the program. I am going to need access." He didn't blink. "Access to what, exactly?" "The main projection screen," I said, "and the audio feed. I need to override the laptop currently connected to the system. Can you do that?" He looked at the stage, where Bruce was now shaking hands with a senator. Then he looked back at me. He had been in this business a long time. He knew the difference between a drunk relative wanting to sing karaoke and a woman who was about to stop a crime. "The current feed is coming from the best man's iPad," Gavin said. "But I have a master override on the console. If you have an HDMI connection or a casting key, I can switch the input. It will cut their feed instantly." "I have the key," I said. "When I give you the signal, cut them. I want the room silent, and I want my screen up. Do not hesitate." "And the signal?" he asked. "I will step onto the floor," I said. "When I touch the microphone, you switch the feed." Gavin nodded once. "Understood. I will have the cable ready." "Thank you, Gavin. Discretion is appreciated." "I am just doing my job, ma'am." I turned away from the booth, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I had the evidence coming in. I had the platform secured. But as I scanned the room one more time, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Near the service entrance, the same side door where I had seen the waiter earlier, there was movement. A young man in a dark suit, one of Bruce's personal assistants, was pushing a luggage cart. It was covered with a black cloth, likely to look like equipment transport, but the wind from the opening door lifted the corner of the fabric. Underneath, I saw the distinctive leather of Louis Vuitton travel bags, not one or two, 4 large suitcases. They were not packed for a honeymoon. They were packed for a disappearance. I looked back at the head table. Bruce was now whispering fiercely to Diana. She nodded, her face pale, and reached for her purse. Camille was gripping Logan's hand, her knuckles white, her eyes darting toward the exit. They were not planning to stay for the dancing. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. They were going to do the speeches, announce the merger to give the stock one last bump, get Logan's public commitment, and then they were going to slip out the back door while everyone was eating cake. By the time anyone realized the accounts were empty, the Harringtons would be on a non-extradition flight to somewhere sunny. And Logan would be left here, legally married to a ghost and professionally tied to a corpse. I checked my watch, 8:45. I did not have 45 minutes. I did not even have 20. If I waited for the scheduled speeches, they might already be gone. I walked back toward the center of the room. The distance between me and my brother felt like miles. I needed the final document from Tessa. I needed the smoking gun that linked their fraud directly to my company. The evidence that gave me the legal standing to shut this entire building down. My phone buzzed again. Tessa. Confirmed. Harrington Global just submitted a vendor application to Lumen Corp yesterday. The signatory on the application is Logan Whitmore. But Hannah, the bank account attached to the application does not belong to the company. It routes directly to a private holding in the Seychelles. They are trying to funnel our vendor payments straight offshore. I stopped walking. The final piece clicked into place. They had forged his signature, or they had tricked him into signing it earlier. Either way, Logan was already on the hook for money laundering. I looked at the stage. Bruce Harrington stood up. He tapped his glass with a spoon. The sharp, high-pitched ringing cut through the chatter. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bruce boomed, his voice full of false joviality. "If I could have your attention, please." The room quieted down. He was starting early. I gripped my phone. I looked at Gavin in the booth. He was watching me. I was not ready. I wanted 10 more minutes to organize the files. But life rarely gives you the time you want. It only gives you the time you have. I took a breath, pushed my shoulders back, and began to move through the crowd. I was not walking to table 19 anymore. I was walking toward the fire. Bruce Harrington's voice boomed through the speakers, filling the ballroom with platitudes about legacy and the sacred bond of trust. He stood on the stage, a picture of paternal benevolence, holding a champagne flute as if it were a scepter. The guests were entranced, their faces turned upward like sunflowers seeking the light, completely unaware that the sun they were worshipping was a burning ball of gas about to implode. I stopped near a large fern arrangement, shielded from the immediate view of the head table but close enough to see the sweat glistening on Bruce's forehead. My phone vibrated against my palm, a relentless pulse of data that demanded my attention. I looked down. The screen was a waterfall of information. Marla had come through with the litigation history, and it was uglier than I had anticipated. It was not just a few civil suits. It was a pattern of behavior so consistent it looked like a business model. Bruce had been sued 15 times in the last 6 years. Every single case involved allegations of investment fraud, misrepresentation of assets, or breach of fiduciary duty, and every single case had been settled out of court with a strict non-disclosure agreement attached. Marla's note at the bottom was chilling. He uses a shell game strategy. He creates a limited liability company, takes the investment money, moves the assets to a different entity, bankrupts the first company, and then settles for pennies on the dollar to make the lawsuit go away. He is not a developer, Hannah. He is a demolition expert. I swiped to the next message. It was from Noah. The forensic analysis of the cash flow was a sea of red ink. Noah had tracked the funds moving through the Harrington accounts, and the pattern was undeniable. It was a classic Ponzi structure. They were using new deposits from recent investors to pay out the dividends to older investors, creating the illusion of profit where there was only a vacuum. They are insolvent. Noah had written, "They have been insolvent for 18 months. The only thing keeping the lights on is velocity. As long as the money keeps moving, nobody notices it is gone. But the music is stopping. They have drained the operating accounts down to $4,000. Hannah, they are cashing out. Tonight is the exit strategy." My stomach twisted. $4,000. That was less than the cost of the flowers on the tables. They were running on fumes. But it was the message from Tessa that stopped my breath in my throat. Tessa had dug into the recruitment consultancy that the Harringtons were using to place Logan in his new role. On the surface, it looked like a standard headhunting firm, but Tessa had found a link to a federal investigation from 3 years ago involving corporate espionage. This firm specialized in placing unqualified candidates into high-level positions at target companies, candidates who were eager, naive, and desperate to please. Once the candidate was inside, they would be manipulated into granting system access to third-party vendors. And the target company in this case? It was Lumen Corp, my company. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I had assumed they were after Logan's savings or his credit rating. I had thought small. I had underestimated their ambition. They did not want Logan's money. He did not have enough to save them. They wanted his credentials. They were placing him as a vice president at Lumen Corp, a subsidiary I had acquired 6 months ago, specifically because they knew the compliance protocols there were automated for executive officers. They were going to use Logan as a human key. He would sign the vendor contracts. He would authorize the transfer of data. He would open the digital backdoor to my own servers. And when the internal auditors inevitably caught the breach, the digital fingerprints would not belong to Bruce or Camille. They would belong to Logan Whitmore. They were framing my brother for corporate espionage against his own sister's company. I looked up at the stage. Camille was standing next to Logan, her hand resting possessively on the back of his neck. She leaned in, whispering something in his ear. I saw Logan's eyes dart toward me, then quickly away. His expression hardened. She was isolating him. She was feeding him the narrative that I was the enemy, the jealous sister who wanted to ruin his big break. She was cutting the lifeline before I could even throw it. I watched as Logan nodded slowly, his posture slumping. He looked defeated, a man who had surrendered his agency for the promise of belonging. I started to move again, my target locked on the stage, but before I could take 2 steps, a hand clamped onto my wrist. It was my mother. Elaine Whitmore looked frantic. Her carefully sprayed hair was starting to fray at the edges, and there was a desperation in her eyes that bordered on mania. She pulled me back, her grip painful. "Where do you think you are going?" she hissed. "Let go of me, Mother," I said, my voice cold. "I saw you," she whispered furiously. "I saw you skulking around, texting on your phone. Camille told me you were planning something. She said you threatened her in the hallway. How could you, Hannah? How could you be so selfish?" "Selfish?" I repeated, looking at the woman who had birthed me but never really seen me. "Is that what you think this is?" "I know what this is," Elaine snapped. "You cannot stand it. You cannot stand that Logan is finally successful. You cannot stand that he found a family that actually has status. You are trying to sabotage him because you are miserable." She dug her nails into my arm. "You are going to fix this," she demanded. "You are going to go up there. You are going to apologize to Camille for whatever nasty thing you said, and you are going to smile. Do you hear me? You are going to apologize." I looked at her. I looked at the fear in her eyes. She was terrified of losing the fantasy. She was so desperate to be part of the Harrington world that she was willing to sacrifice her son to keep the illusion alive. "I cannot do that," I said. "If you ruin this night," Elaine said, her voice trembling, "if you embarrass us in front of these people, I will never forgive you. I mean it. Hannah, you will be dead to me." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and final. She meant it. If I stepped onto that stage and exposed the truth, I would not just be destroying the wedding. I would be destroying her dream. I would be the villain in the family story forever. I would be the daughter who broke the family apart out of spite. I looked past her, at Logan on the stage. He was smiling now, a brittle, fragile smile, as Bruce handed him the microphone. He looked like a lamb being led to the slaughter, convinced he was the guest of honor at the feast. He was my big brother. He had taught me how to tie my shoes. He had protected me from bullies on the playground. He was weak. Yes, he was foolish. Yes, but he was not a criminal. If I stayed silent, my mother would love me. I would keep the peace, and Logan would go to prison for 10 years. If I spoke up, my mother would hate me. The family would be shattered, but Logan would be free. It was not a choice. It was a duty. I looked at my mother one last time. I memorized the lines of her face, knowing that the next time she looked at me, it would be with hatred. "I am sorry, Mom," I said softly. "Good," she exhaled, thinking I had capitulated. "Now go make it right." "I intend to," I said. I pulled my arm free from her grasp. I did not walk toward Camille to apologize. I turned and walked straight toward Gavin in the sound booth. I raised my hand, giving the signal we had agreed upon. Gavin nodded. His hand moved to the console. On the stage, Bruce opened his mouth to make the final toast. "To the future," Bruce shouted. "To the truth," I whispered. The room went black. For a split second, there was total silence. Then, the hum of the projector kicked in, a sound like a jet engine starting up. A beam of pure white light cut through the darkness, hitting the massive screen behind the stage. The photo of the happy couple vanished. In its place, a document appeared. It was 10 feet tall, crisp and undeniable. It was a federal indictment summary from the Southern District of New York, listing Bruce Harrington as a person of interest in a massive wire fraud investigation. The gasps from the crowd sounded like all the oxygen being sucked out of the room at once. I stepped into the light. The silence that followed the appearance of the indictment on the massive projection screen was not empty. It was heavy, suffocating, and pressurized, like the air in a submarine right before the hull breaches. The document loomed over the ballroom, 10 feet high, exposing the words United States District Court and wire fraud for 200 members of Charleston's elite to see. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. The jazz band had stopped playing. The waiters froze with trays of champagne half tilted. Even the air conditioning seemed to hold its breath. Then, Camille Harrington shattered the moment. She did not faint. She did not gasp in horror at the revelation of her father's crimes. She did exactly what a cornered predator does. She attacked the nearest threat. "Turn it off!" she shrieked, her voice tearing through the room, shrill and ugly. She lunged for the microphone that Logan was still holding, her nails raking against the metal mesh. "Turn it off! It is a lie! It is a hack! Somebody get security!" She spun around, her eyes wild, searching the room until they locked onto me. I was standing in the pool of light near the center aisle, my phone in one hand, my posture relaxed. I was not hiding. "It is her!" Camille screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "It is Hannah! She is doing this! She told me in the hallway she would ruin my wedding! She is jealous! She is a psycho!" The accusation rippled through the crowd. Heads turned toward me. I saw the confusion on their faces. It was a brilliant move. In a room full of people who valued social order above truth, an angry, jealous sister was a much easier explanation than a massive corporate conspiracy. It was a narrative they understood. It was a narrative they were comfortable with. Logan looked at the screen, then at Camille, and finally at me. His face was pale, his eyes wide and watery. He looked like a child waking up from a nightmare only to find his bed was on fire. "Hannah?" he stammered, his voice amplified by the microphone Camille was still clutching. "Hannah, what is going on? Did you put that up there?" "She hacked the system," Camille sobbed, throwing herself against Logan's chest, burying her face in his tuxedo. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. "She threatened me. Logan, she said if I did not call off the wedding, she would humiliate us. She hates that you are happy. She hates that you are successful." Logan wrapped his arms around her instinctively, his protective programming kicking in. He looked at me, and his expression shifted from confusion to hurt, and then to a familiar, weary disappointment. It was the same look he gave me when we were teenagers, and I refused to lie to our parents about his grades. It was the look that said, "Why do you always have to be the difficult one?" "Hannah," Logan said, his voice cracking, "please, turn it off. We can talk about this later. Don't do this here. Why do you always have to make a scene?" The words hit me in the chest, but they did not pierce the armor I had built over the last hour. You always make a scene. That was the family mantra. If I spoke up about unfairness, I was dramatic. If I pointed out a lie, I was negative. If I refused to be a doormat, I was difficult. I did not raise my voice. I did not step back. I walked forward, closing the distance between myself and the stage. The crowd parted for me, creating a wide aisle, their eyes darting between the jealous sister and the grieving bride. "I am not doing anything." "Logan," I said, my voice projecting clearly even without a microphone. "I am just standing here. That document is not a Photoshop job. It is a public record from the Southern District of New York, case number 4920. "It is a lie," Bruce Harrington bellowed, stepping in front of Logan, trying to use his sheer physical bulk to block the view of the screen. "It is a fabrication. A competitor is trying to smear us. Security! Where is the damn security? Get this woman out of here!" Bruce was sweating profusely. A vein in his temple was throbbing. He looked at the security guards posted at the doors, but they did not move. They were looking at Gavin, and Gavin was looking at his console, pretending to be very busy with a knob that did nothing. "Logan," I said, ignoring Bruce and locking eyes with my brother. "Look at them." "Stop it, Hannah," Logan pleaded, his hand shaking on Camille's back. "Just go, please." "Look at them." "Logan," I repeated, my voice hard as granite. "Why is your fiancé crying without tears? Why is your father-in-law sweating through a $3,000 suit? And why are there 4 Louis Vuitton suitcases sitting by the service exit right now?" Logan froze. The specific detail about the suitcases caught him off guard. He blinked, his brow furrowing. "What?" he whispered. "Don't listen to her," Camille yelled, pulling his face toward hers. "She is crazy. We are going on our honeymoon. Of course we have bags." The honeymoon is in 2 days. Camille, I said calmly, the flight to Italy leaves on Thursday. Why are the bags by the back door on Tuesday night? And why is the car out back running? Bruce realized he was losing control. He grabbed Logan's shoulder, his grip tight and desperate. "Logan, listen to me," Bruce said, his voice dropping to a low, urgent pitch that the microphone still picked up. "This is business. This is high-level corporate warfare. People try to take down successful men like us all the time. You need to trust me. We need to sign the partnership agreement now. Right now. We sign it. We announce the merger, and we show them we are united. That is how we win. Do not let her poison your future, son. Sign the papers." He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document and a gold pen. He thrust them toward Logan. "Sign it," Bruce commanded, his benevolent mask slipping to reveal the tyrant underneath. "Sign it, and we walk out of here as partners. We leave this mess behind." I saw Logan's hand twitch. He looked at the pen. He looked at Bruce, the father figure he had always wanted. He looked at Camille, the woman who promised him a life of ease. They were offering him everything he craved: acceptance, status, love. All he had to do was close his eyes to the truth one last time. He reached for the pen. My heart hammered against my ribs. He was going to do it. He was going to sign his life away because it was easier than facing the reality that he had been played. I checked my phone. A new message from Marla had just come through. "Marla, Hannah, be careful. I just got a ping from my contact at the bureau. They have agents in the perimeter. They are waiting for the Harringtons to make a move. If you trigger a panic, and they hostage the guests, this turns into a tactical situation. Do not obstruct the federal timeline. Keep them in the room, but do not let them leave." I took a deep breath. I had to thread a needle while riding a roller coaster. I needed to stop Logan from signing, keep the Harringtons from fleeing, and not get arrested for interfering with a federal investigation. I looked up at the booth. Gavin was watching me, his hand hovering over the controls. I gave a subtle signal. 2 fingers to the left. It was the code we had agreed upon for containment. Gavin spoke into his headset. Suddenly, the side doors, the ones the Harringtons were eyeing, clicked audibly. The red exit lights flickered. A few uniformed staff members, acting on Gavin's instructions, moved casually to stand in front of the main double doors, holding trays of empty glasses as makeshift barriers. It was the polite security I had requested. Anyone trying to leave would have to physically shove a waiter aside, creating a scene that even the Harringtons would hesitate to make. "Logan," I called out, my voice cutting through Bruce's hypnotic sales pitch. "If you sign that paper, you are not becoming a partner. You are becoming a shield." "Shut up!" Camille screamed, finally breaking character completely. Her face twisted into a snarl. "Shut your mouth, you miserable little peasant!" The crowd gasped. The sweet southern belle had vanished, replaced by a cornered rat. "They are not hiring you for your talent. Logan," I continued, relentless. "They are hiring you because your background check is clean. They are hiring you because you are the only person in this room who does not know that Harrington Global is bankrupt." "Bankrupt?" Logan repeated the word, his hand hovering inches from the pen. "We are not bankrupt," Bruce roared. "We have assets. We have liquidity." "You have $4,000 in your operating account." "Bruce," I said, "I have the ledger right here." I held up my phone. "And the company you are merging with," I continued, taking another step forward, "the company you want Logan to sign over access to? That is Lumen Corp." Bruce froze. The color drained from his face so fast, it looked like the blood had simply evaporated. "You know Lumen Corp, don't you?" "Bruce?" I asked. "You know their compliance protocols? You know their vendor payment systems? You know that if you can get a vice president to authorize a vendor bypass, you can drain the accounts before anyone notices?" "Who are you?" Bruce whispered. It was not a question of identity. It was a question of threat level. He was realizing, finally, that I was not just a sister. "I am the person who bought Lumen Corp 6 months ago," I said. The silence that followed was absolute. Logan dropped the pen. It hit the stage floor with a clatter that sounded like a gunshot. You own it? Logan stared at me, his mouth open. You own the company they are hiring me for? I own the parent company. Logan, I said. I own the building we are standing in right now. I own the catering company that made the food you are eating, and I own the servers that Bruce was planning to hack using your login credentials. Camille stared at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. She realized the game was over. The money was gone. The scapegoat was gone. The exit was blocked. You ruined everything, she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. No, Camille, I said. I just turned on the lights. Bruce looked around the room. He saw the doors blocked by staff. He saw the guests staring at him with a mixture of horror and fascination. He saw the indictment still glowing on the screen behind him. He looked at his watch. We are leaving, Bruce announced, grabbing Diana's arm. Come on, Camille, Logan, if you want a future, you come with us now. This woman is delusional. We will sort this out with the lawyers. He tried to bulldoze his way off the stage, dragging his wife. Camille grabbed Logan's arm, digging her nails in. Come on, she urged him. Don't listen to her. She is lying. We have to go. Logan stood there, torn between the physical pull of his fiancée and the gravitational pull of the truth I had just dropped. Logan, I said, my voice soft now. Do you see the suitcases? Do you really think they packed a bag for you? Logan looked at the side door. He saw the cart. He counted the bags. 1, 2, 3, 4. Bruce, Diana, Camille, and a bag for the money. There was no bag for him. He looked back at Camille. She was pulling at him, her eyes frantic, looking past him toward the door. She wasn't looking at him with love. She was looking at him like he was a piece of luggage she was about to leave behind. There is no ticket for me, is there? Logan asked, his voice barely audible. We can buy one at the airport, Camille yelled. Just move. No, Logan said. He pulled his arm back. Camille stumbled, losing her grip. She looked at him with shock, then with disgust. You are pathetic, she spat at him. Just like your sister. She turned and ran after her parents, who were currently shoving their way through a cluster of confused bridesmaids toward the side exit. Gavin, I said into the quiet room. The doors. The side exit clicked loudly, locked. Bruce slammed into the door, rattling the handle. He turned around, his face purple with rage. Open this door, he screamed. I will sue everyone in this room. Do you know who I am? We know exactly who you are. Mr. Harrington, I said, and so do the people waiting outside. I looked at Marla's text again. Agents moving in. 30 seconds. I had not just ruined a wedding, I had served them up on a silver platter. Logan stood alone on the stage, the gold pen lying at his feet, the empty space where his fiancée had been standing now feeling like a chasm. He looked small. He looked broken. But he was safe. It is over, Logan, I said. No, he said, looking at the door where Bruce was pounding his fists against the wood. I think it is just starting. And he was right, because the sirens were audible now, rising over the sound of the ocean outside, getting louder and louder, coming to collect the debt that the Harringtons had been running from for years. The atmosphere in the ballroom had shifted from celebration to a frantic, low-frequency vibration that only a few of us could feel. To the casual observer, the party was at its peak. Waiters were circulating with trays of late-night sliders. The band was playing a soft ballad, and the lighting had dimmed to a romantic gold. But I was not a casual observer. I was a hunter watching the prey realize the cage was closing. I stood near the periphery of the room, my back against the cool plaster of the wall, watching the Harrington family cluster near the VIP table. They were moving with the jerky, synchronized panic of a flock of birds sensing a storm. A young man in a sharp black suit, one of Bruce Harrington's personal assistants, slid through the crowd like an eel. I watched him lean in close to Camille. He did not smile. He did not offer her a drink. He whispered something into her ear, his eyes darting toward the service exit. Camille nodded, a sharp, jerking motion. She immediately grabbed her skirt, feigning a look of distress. "My heel!" she said loudly enough for the surrounding guests to hear. "I think I broke a strap. I just need to pop into the back for a second to change." It was a classic extraction technique. Create a minor, relatable emergency to justify leaving the main stage, then vanish before anyone realizes the moment has turned into an hour. I touched the small earpiece I had inserted into my right ear, hidden beneath my hair. "Gavin," I said, my voice barely a murmur. "Status on the rear exit." Gavin's voice came back instantly, clear and devoid of emotion. "We have activity. A black Suburban just pulled up to the loading dock. Engine is running. The driver is staying in the vehicle. They are not parking. Hannah, they are idling." "They are running," I said to myself. "It looks that way," Gavin confirmed. "The assistant is trying to clear a path through the kitchen corridor. Do you want me to lock the doors?" "No," I replied instantly. "If you lock the doors now, they will cause a scene. They will claim fire safety violations or panic. We need to keep this contained until the evidence is on the screen. Just slow them down. Use the protocol." "Understood," Gavin said, initiating standard security delay. I watched as the assistant tried to guide Camille toward the discreet side door that led to the kitchen and the loading dock beyond. But as they approached, two large men in venue security uniforms stepped into their path. They were not aggressive. They were maddeningly polite. I could see the assistant arguing. I could see Camille gesturing at her dress. The guards were nodding sympathetically but pointing at their clipboards, likely improvising a story about a spilled chemical cleaner or a temporary blockage in the hallway. It was soft power in action. It would not hold them forever, but it would buy me 5 minutes. 5 minutes was all I needed. Across the room, Logan was standing alone. He looked lost. The Harringtons had physically separated him from the herd. Bruce was on one side of the room shaking hands with the senator, creating a diversion. Camille was trying to bolt out the back, and Logan was being positioned near the stage steps, waiting for a speech that was never meant to be a celebration, but a distraction. He adjusted his tie, looking around for Camille. He had no idea she was currently trying to abandon him. I pushed off the wall, intending to intercept him, to give him one last chance to walk away with his dignity intact. But before I could take 3 steps, a hand clamped onto my forearm. It was my mother, again. Elaine Whitmore was vibrating with nervous energy. Her face was flushed, her eyes wide and glassy with champagne and anxiety. She dug her fingers into my sleeve, pulling me back into the shadows of a large floral arrangement. "Stop it," she hissed, her voice trembling. "Just stop it, Hannah." "Mother, let go," I said, trying to pry her fingers loose without causing a scene. "I see what you are doing," she whispered furiously. "You are staring at them. You are stalking them. You are making everyone uncomfortable. Why can you not just let your brother have this? Why must you always be the dark cloud?" "I am not the cloud." "Mother," I said, my patience finally snapping, "I am the only person in this room who brought an umbrella." "You are jealous," she accused, tears welling up in her eyes. It was her favorite weapon, the weaponized fragility she had used to control my father for 30 years. "You cannot stand that Logan married into money. You want to ruin it so we are all miserable like you." "Money?" I laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "Mother, there is no money. Look at them. Really look at them." "They are wealthy," she insisted. "Bruce is a genius." "Bruce is a thief," I said, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "And right now, at this very second, your genius is trying to put your son on a stage to sign a document that will send him to federal prison for 15 years. Elaine froze. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The sheer specificity of my statement short-circuited her denial. "You are lying," she breathed. "I am not lying," I said. "And right now, you are holding my arm, preventing me from saving him. You are so desperate to look rich that you are helping them sell your own son." She stared at me, her face pale. Mother?" she stammered. "You are telling me to be silent," I said, leaning in close, letting every word land like a physical blow. You are telling me to be polite. You are telling me to sit down and shut up. You are telling me to let them trap him. Elaine's grip on my arm slackened. She looked across the room at Logan. He was smiling nervously at a guest, but he looked small, vulnerable, for the first time in decades. She did not see the golden boy. She saw her child. "Hannah," she whispered, "what are you going to do?" "I am going to do what you should have done," I said. "I am going to protect him." I pulled my arm free and turned away from her. I did not look back to see if she was crying. There was no time for comfort. My phone buzzed 3 times in rapid succession. It was the signal I had been waiting for. I pulled the device from my pocket. It was a message from Noah Mercer, my forensic analyst. "Noah, we got it. It took a deep dive into the Cayman registry, but we found the link. The shell company that received the drained funds from Harrington Global is listed as CV Holdings." Noah. I ran a cross-reference on the name. CV stands for Camille Vance. That was her name before she legally changed it 6 years ago. "Hannah, she is not just the daughter. She is the architect. She is the signatory on the offshore accounts. She has $3 million sitting in a bank in Zurich while her father takes the heat here." The pieces slammed into place. Bruce was the face, Bruce was the bluster, but Camille, the sweet, smiling, victimized Camille, was the brain. She was not running away with her parents. She was planning to run from her parents eventually. She had set everyone up, her father, her mother, and my brother. I looked toward the side door. The security guards were still holding the line, but Camille was getting aggressive now. She was shoving past the assistant, her voice rising. "I said let me through," she screeched. "I need air. I am the bride." She was panic spiraling. She knew the walls were closing in. "Gavin," I said into my earpiece, "how much time do we have?" "The driver just flashed his lights," Gavin replied. "He is getting restless. And Hannah, I am seeing movement at the front entrance. 2 SUVs with government plates just parked in the valet circle. Men in windbreakers are getting out. The feds were here. If they breached the room before I revealed the truth, Logan would be swept up in the raid. He would be handcuffed on the floor alongside Bruce and Camille. The media would get the photo of the Whitmore crime family. His reputation would be incinerated before he could even speak. I needed to clear his name before the handcuffs went on. I needed the room to see that he was the victim, not the accomplice. "Hold the feds at the door if you can," I commanded. "Tell them we have a hostage situation if you have to. Just give me 60 seconds. 60 seconds, Gavin said, cutting it close. "It is the only way," I said. I looked at the stage. The music had stopped. Bruce Harrington had managed to extricate himself from the senator and had rushed to the microphone. He sensed the energy shifting. He knew he was running out of runway. He needed to regain control of the narrative immediately. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bruce boomed, his voice slightly too loud, slightly too high-pitched. "If everyone could please take their seats, we have a very special announcement. A union of families, a union of empires." He gestured wildly for Logan to join him on stage. Logan hesitated, looking toward the side door where Camille was still arguing with security. "Logan," Bruce commanded, his smile looking like a rictus of terror. "Come on up here, son. The future is waiting." Logan stepped onto the stage. He looked terrified. I checked my phone one last time. The file from Noah was downloaded. The visuals were cued. I had the evidence that Camille Vance was a fraud. I had the evidence that Bruce Harrington was a thief. And I had the evidence that Logan Whitmore was a patsy. "Gavin," I said, my voice steady as steel, "transfer control to my device." "You are live in 3. Gavin counted down in my ear. 2? I stepped out from the shadows of the floral arrangement and into the center aisle. 1? "Execute," I said. I tapped the screen of my phone. The timeline was theirs, but the ending was mine. The room had settled into a silence that felt less like respect and more like the heavy, pressurized quiet of a courtroom right before the verdict is read. The waiters had retreated to the shadows. their silver trays held against their chests like shields. The clinking of silverware had stopped. Even the ice melting in the crystal glasses seemed to pause. Bruce Harrington stood at the center of the stage. The spotlight hit him from above, casting deep shadows under his eyes and highlighting the sheen of perspiration on his upper lip. He gripped the microphone stand with both hands, leaning into it as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. To the 200 guests sitting in the velvet chairs, he looked like a titan of industry, a man overcome with emotion on his daughter's big night. To me, he looked like a man trying to sell a car with no engine to a blind man. Camille stood next to him. She had abandoned her escape attempt at the side door, likely realizing that running now would look like an admission of guilt. Instead, she had pivoted back to the only strategy she knew: performance. She was clinging to Logan's arm, her fingers interlaced with his, but there was no softness in her touch. I could see the tension in her forearm muscles. She was not holding his hand. She was applying a tourniquet. She was anchoring him to the floor, terrified that if she let go, he would drift away into the reality I had just exposed to him. And then there was my mother. Elaine Whitmore sat in the front row, center seat. She was beaming. She sat with her back perfectly straight, her chin lifted, radiating a blinding, terrifying pride. She looked at Bruce and Camille with a reverence usually reserved for religious icons. She looked at the crowd, drinking in their envy, believing that she had finally arrived. She had no idea that the carriage she was riding in had already turned back into a pumpkin, and the horses were actually rats. It broke my heart to look at her, not because I feared her anger, but because I pitied her blindness. She was watching the highlight reel of her life, unaware that the tape was about to burn. I stood at the edge of the room, near the heavy velvet drapes that covered the windows. I was invisible to them. I was the ghost at the feast. My phone was in my hand, the screen glowing softly against my palm. The interface was simple: a single red button on a black background, linked directly to Gavin's console in the booth. I looked up at the booth. Gavin was there, a silhouette against the monitors. He wasn't looking at the stage. He was looking at me. He was waiting. Bruce cleared his throat. The sound echoed through the speakers, a wet, guttural noise that made a few guests shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Family," Bruce began, his voice booming with a practiced gravitas. "It is a word we throw around loosely these days, but for the Harringtons, and now for the Whitmores, it means something sacred. It means loyalty. It means protection. It means that when the world turns its back on you, you have a fortress to retreat to." The irony was so thick I could almost taste it. He was talking about a fortress while actively trying to burn down my brother's future to keep himself warm. "I look at Logan," Bruce continued, turning to gesture at my brother, "and I see a man of integrity, a man who understands that success is not just about numbers. It is about trust. It is about putting your name on the line for the people you love." Logan did not smile. He stood rigid, his tuxedo looking suddenly too large for him. He was looking at the floor, then at the audience, and then, inevitably, his eyes found mine. For years, Logan had looked at me with pity. He saw me as the sister who couldn't catch a break, the one who worked too hard for too little, the one who didn't understand how the real world of high society worked. But in that moment, across the crowded ballroom, the pity was gone. In its place was fear, and beneath the fear, a tiny, flickering spark of doubt. He was remembering the text message. He was remembering the Louis Vuitton bags by the door. He was remembering the urgency in Bruce's voice when he demanded a signature. He looked at me, and for the first time in his life, he didn't see his little sister. He saw the only person in the room who wasn't trying to take something from him. I held his gaze. I didn't nod. I didn't wave. I just stood there, steady as a lighthouse, letting him know that the crash was coming, but I would be there to pull him out of the wreckage. "Tonight," Bruce said, his voice rising in a crescendo, "we are not just celebrating a marriage. We are celebrating a merger of destinies. We are bringing Logan into the fold, not just as a son-in-law, but as a partner, a leader, the future CEO of our joint ventures. A ripple of polite applause broke out. My mother clapped the loudest, her hands high in the air. Bruce smiled, but his eyes were dead. He looked at his watch again, a quick, nervous twitch of the wrist. He was timing the getaway. He needed the speech to end so they could get Logan to sign the papers in the chaos of the reception, and then slip out before the federal agents breached the perimeter. "So," Bruce said, raising his glass high, "let us make this official. Let us bind our houses together with a promise that cannot be broken." Camille squeezed Logan's arm tighter. She looked up at him with a desperate, frozen smile, silently commanding him to play his part. I unlocked my phone. My thumb hovered over the screen. The air in the room felt electric, charged with the static of 1,000 lies rubbing against the truth. I could feel my own pulse in my fingertips. This was it. This was the moment I had been training for since I was a child. Hiding in my room while my mother told me I wasn't good enough. I wasn't good enough for their fantasy, but I was more than enough for their reality. Bruce took a deep breath, preparing for the final line, the line that would seal the deal, the line that would signal the end of the play. "From today," Bruce announced, looking out at the crowd with the arrogance of a man who believes he has gotten away with murder. "From today, we are officially one." I did not hesitate. I did not flinch. I pressed the button. It was a small motion, a fraction of an inch, but it felt like pulling the trigger on a cannon. I slipped the phone into my pocket and stepped out from the shadows. I walked into the light, my heels clicking rhythmically on the hardwood floor. I did not rush. I did not run. I walked with the slow, terrifying inevitability of a glacier. The room was still looking at Bruce, waiting for the toast. They did not know that the world had just changed. They did not know that the man on stage was already a ghost. I kept my eyes on Logan. "Watch me," I thought. "Watch me save you." I was halfway to the stage when the screen behind them flickered. The image of the happy couple dissolved into pixelated static, and the low hum of the projector deepened into a growl. The silence in the room shattered, replaced by a collective gasp that sounded like 200 people realizing they were standing on a trapdoor. I stopped walking. I stood in the center of the aisle, alone, unarmed, and completely in control. The story they wanted to tell was over. Mine had just begun. The image on the screen was 20 feet high. It was not a romantic montage. It was a PDF file, scanned in high contrast, the black text sharp against the white background. The header was unmistakable. United States District Court, Southern District of New York. Below that, in bold typeface, was the defendant's name, Bruce Harrington, and next to it, the charge, conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The ballroom did not gasp. It went dead. The silence was absolute, a vacuum created by the sudden evacuation of air from 200 pairs of lungs. Bruce turned around. He looked at the screen, blinking as if the light were physically hurting him. He chuckled, a wet, nervous sound that echoed horribly in the quiet room. "Technical glitch," Bruce shouted, waving his hand dismissively at the screen. "Wrong file. Someone from the office mixed up the due diligence files with the slideshow. Turn it off. Cut the feed." He looked up at the booth, making a slashing motion across his throat. Gavin did not move. "It is not a glitch, Bruce," I said. My voice was not loud, but in the dead silence, it carried to the back of the room. Bruce froze. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fury. "Next slide," I said. The screen flickered. The indictment vanished. In its place appeared a complex flowchart. It was the graphic Noah had generated, a spiderweb of red lines connecting various entities. At the center was Harrington Global Solutions. Radiating out from it were arrows pointing to a dozen other names: Apex Consulting, Blue Horizon Ventures, Vance Holdings. "What is this?" someone in the front row whispered. It was the banker Bruce had been clapping on the shoulder earlier. "That is a cash flow analysis," I answered. Stepping closer to the stage, I spoke to the room, not to Bruce. "It shows the movement of capital from the Harrington operating accounts over the last 6 months. You see the red arrows? Those are outgoing transfers. You see the dates? Every single transfer corresponds to a frantic fundraising call Bruce made to investors in this room. I pointed to a specific cluster of data points on the screen. October 12th, I read aloud. Received $50,000 from the Miller Trust. October 13th, transferred $50,000 to an offshore entity in the Cayman Islands. October 14th, account balance returned to zero. I looked at Mrs. Miller, an elderly woman in pearls sitting at table 3. She had her hand over her mouth. He did not invest your money, Mrs. Miller, I said gently. He mailed it to himself. Lies, Bruce roared. He lunged toward me, but stopped at the edge of the stage, realizing that jumping down would look like an attack. This is slander. I will sue you for every penny you have. I will bury you. Next slide, I said. The screen changed again. This time, it was a photograph. It was grainy, taken at a corporate event in Las Vegas 5 years ago. It showed Bruce Harrington standing next to a young woman. She had dark hair instead of blonde, and she was wearing glasses. But the face was unmistakable. She was holding a name tag that read, Camille Vance, VP of Operations. The text below the photo read, Nevada State Investigation. Subject, Camille Vance. Status, Person of Interest. Embezzlement Scheme. 2019. The room erupted. It wasn't silence anymore. It was a low roar of shock. People were standing up. Chairs scraped against the floor. Camille, who had been frozen next to Logan, suddenly snapped. She moved with the speed of a feral animal. She snatched the microphone from the stand, tearing it from its clip. "Stop it!" she shrieked, her voice tearing through the speakers, causing a feedback whine that made people cover their ears. "This is fake! She photoshopped it! Look at her! Look at how she is dressed! She is a jealous, pathetic loser who cannot stand that her brother chose me. She made this up on her computer because she is mentally unstable." She pointed a trembling finger at me, her face twisted into a mask of pure ugliness. "She is obsessed with Logan!" Camille yelled, playing the incestuous jealousy card, the most desperate and disgusting defense she had. "She wants to ruin his life because she has nothing. She is a nobody, a nothing." The accusation hung in the air, vibrating with malice. I did not flinch. I did not get angry. I did not raise my voice to match hers. I let her scream. I let her show the room exactly who she was. When she stopped to take a breath, I spoke. "That is a public record, Camille," I said. "Not an opinion, and that photo was taken the year you legally changed your name from Vance to Harrington to hide your track record." "You have no right," she screamed. "Who do you think you are? You are just a sad little accountant." "I am an accountant," I agreed, "and I am also an investor." I took one more step forward. I was now standing directly at the foot of the stage. I looked up at them, Bruce, sweating and ruined, Camille, shrieking and exposed, and Logan, standing between them, holding the gold pen like it was a live grenade. "You mentioned my company earlier, Bruce," I said. "Lumen Corp, the company you are so eager for Logan to join, the company whose vendor payment system you were planning to exploit." Bruce stared at me. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving. "You are hiring Logan as a vice president of strategy," I continued. "You told him the board approved it. You told him the employment contract was standard." "It is standard," Bruce insisted, though his voice was shaking. "It is not," I said. "I reviewed it 10 minutes ago. It assigns all personal liability for financial discrepancies to the signatory. It makes Logan responsible for your theft." "How did you see the contract?" Camille snapped. "That is internal data." I looked at her. I looked at the crowd. I saw the event manager, Gavin, watching me with respect. I saw the security guards stepping back, sensing the shift in authority. "I saw the contract," I said clearly, "because I own the company." The words landed like stones in a pond. "What?" Camille whispered. "Lumen Corp is a subsidiary of Whitmore Holdings," I said. "I founded Whitmore Holdings 7 years ago. I acquired Lumen 6 months ago. I own 51% of the voting stock. I paused to let the math sink in. That means I am not just Logan's sister, I said. I am the chairman of the board. I am the majority shareholder, and I am the person who signs your paychecks. The room went deathly silent. Bruce Harrington looked like he had been hit with a shovel. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He looked at me, really looked at me. For the first time, he saw the blazer, the lack of jewelry, the sensible shoes, and suddenly, he realized that he had misread the signs. He had mistaken modesty for poverty. He had mistaken silence for weakness. You, Bruce rasped, you own Lumen? I do, I said. And as the majority owner, I am authorizing an immediate internal compliance investigation into the hiring practices of the Charleston branch, specifically regarding the recruitment of unqualified executives for the purpose of fraud. I pulled my phone out. I have already sent the directive to legal, I said. Your access badges have been deactivated. Your company accounts are frozen pending audit. And the contract you wanted Logan to sign? It is void. I looked at the crowd. And just so everyone is clear, I added, my voice cutting like a razor. Any funds transferred from Harrington Global to my subsidiary in the last 90 days will be clawed back. If you are an investor here, and you gave Bruce money, I suggest you call your lawyers, now. The dynamic in the room inverted instantly. A minute ago, I was the joke. I was the poor relation. I was the stain on the carpet. Now, I was the only person in the room who mattered. The guests looked at me with a new expression. It wasn't pity. It was fear. It was the terrified respect that the prey gives to the apex predator. The women who had laughed at my shoes were now looking at their own husbands, wondering if their portfolios were safe. The men who had dismissed me were doing mental calculations, realizing that the quiet woman in the corner had a net worth that eclipsed the entire room combined. I looked up at Logan. He was staring at me as if I were a stranger. He looked at my face, searching for the little sister he used to boss around, the one he used to protect. He didn't find her. He found a CEO. He found a woman who had built an empire in the dark while he was playing dress-up in the light. Hannah, he whispered. Put the pen down, Logan, I said. He looked at the pen in his hand. He looked at Bruce, who was now slumped against the podium, a defeated man. He looked at Camille, who was staring at me with a mixture of hatred and awe. Then he looked back at me. In his eyes, I saw the shift. He realized that for the last 10 years, he had been chasing the wrong kind of power. He had been chasing the flash, the noise, the applause. He had missed the substance. He realized that while he was trying to look important, I had actually become important. He opened his hand. The gold pen fell. It hit the stage with a final, metallic clatter. I am not signing it, Logan said. His voice was shaky, but it was his own. You idiot, Camille screamed, lunging at him. Sign it. If you don't sign it, we lose everything. Sign it. She clawed at his tuxedo. Desperate, manic. Logan stepped back, pushing her hands away. He looked at her with disgust. I think you already lost everything, Camille, Logan said. You just didn't know who you were playing against. He walked to the edge of the stage. He didn't take the stairs. He sat on the edge and jumped down, landing on the floor next to me. He stood up and straightened his jacket. He looked at me. He didn't hug me. He didn't cry. He just nodded. You own the company? He asked quietly. I do, I said. And the building? That too. Logan let out a long, shuddering breath. He looked at his fiancée, who was now sobbing on the stage, and his father-in-law, who was frantically typing on his phone, trying to move money that was already frozen. Well, Logan said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. I guess I don't need to worry about the job interview then. No, I said, but we do need to worry about the exit strategy. I nodded toward the back of the room. The double doors swung open. It wasn't the waiters this time. 6 men in blue windbreakers with yellow lettering on the back walked in. FBI. The guests screamed. The facade of the high society party finally crumbled completely, revealing the crime scene it had always been. "Bruce Harrington," the lead agent announced, his voice booming without a microphone. "Camille Vance, please step away from the podium and keep your hands where we can see them." I turned to Logan. "Don't say a word," I instructed him. "My lawyer is already in the parking lot. He represents you now." Logan looked at me. "You planned all of this?" "I didn't plan for them to be criminals, Logan," I said. "I just planned for them to be caught." I watched as the agents moved toward the stage. I watched as Bruce raised his shaking hands. I watched as Camille screamed obscenities at the federal officers. It was a tragedy. It was a disaster. But as I stood there, watching the empire of lies collapse, I felt the heavy weight on my chest finally lift. I had done it. I had saved him. And all it cost me was my anonymity. The chaos that erupted as the federal agents ascended the stairs was a strange mix of high-decibel shouting and absolute, stunned paralysis. The guests were frozen in their expensive seats, watching the disintegration of a family dynasty in real time. Bruce Harrington was no longer the benevolent patriarch. He was a cornered animal, his face a mottled purple, sweat streaming down his collar as he tried to put Logan between himself and the advancing officers. "Logan, tell them!" Bruce screamed, grabbing my brother's shoulder with a grip that looked painful. "Tell them this is a misunderstanding. Tell them we are partners. You are the signatory. You are liable too." It was the final confession, shouted in a moment of panic. He was not trying to save Logan. He was trying to drag him down into the mud so he would not have to drown alone. I stepped forward, closing the final distance between myself and the wreckage of the wedding party. I looked Logan dead in the eye, ignoring the agents who were shouting commands at Bruce and Camille. "He is not your partner, Logan," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "And you are not the love of their lives. You never were. You are just a door. You are nothing more than a rusted hinge they needed to grease so they could walk into my vault." Logan stared at me. The brutality of the metaphor seemed to slap him sober. He looked down at Bruce's hand on his shoulder, the hand that had patted his back, poured his scotch, and guided him blindly toward a prison cell. For the first time in his 30 years of life, Logan did not lean into the touch. He recoiled. He took a sharp step back, physically ripping himself away from the man he had wanted to be his father. "Don't touch me," Logan said. His voice was shaking, but it was loud enough. "Logan!" Camille wailed, throwing herself at him, her hands clawing at his lapels. She was sobbing, but her eyes were dry and furious. "Baby, please, don't let them take me. You promised. You promised to take care of me. Tell them to stop. Tell your crazy sister to call them off." Logan looked down at her. He looked at the woman who had isolated him from his friends, who had mocked his family, who had turned him into a stranger. He raised his hands, not to hold her, but to push her away. "I promised to marry Camille," Logan said, his voice cracking with betrayal. "I did not promise to aid and abet a fugitive." As he pushed her back, Camille stumbled. Her heel caught on the hem of her dress, and she flailed, her arms jerking wildly. In the scramble, the heavy silver brooch she had pinned to the back of her lacework, my grandmother's stolen sapphire, caught on Logan's button. It ripped free with a sickening tear of fabric and clattered onto the hardwood stage floor. The sound of the metal hitting the wood was tiny compared to the shouting of the FBI agents, but to me, it sounded like a gavel striking a sounding block. Camille scrambled for it, her greed overriding her dignity even as the handcuffs came out, but Logan was faster. He reached down and snatched the brooch from the floor. He held it in his fist, the sharp edges digging into his palm. "That does not belong to you," Logan whispered to her. "Ms. Vance, hands behind your back," an agent barked, spinning Camille around. The illusion was over. The screams of indignation turned into the metallic click of restraints. I watched as Bruce Harrington was pressed against the podium he had used to preach about honor, his hands cuffed behind his back. I watched as Camille was led away, kicking and screaming obscenities that would ensure she was never invited to a Charleston garden party ever again. The room watched in a horrified trance as the royal family of the evening was marched down the center aisle, flanked by agents. The silence they left behind was heavy, filled with the dust of shattered reputations. I did not watch them leave. I looked at Logan. He stood alone on the huge, empty stage. The spotlight was still on him, illuminating a man who had lost a bride, a job, and a father figure in the span of 10 minutes. He looked broken. He walked down the stairs, moving slowly, like an old man. He stopped in front of me. He opened his hand. The sapphire brooch sat in his palm, the silver tarnished, but the stones still bright. He picked it up and pinned it gently to the lapel of my navy blazer. His hands were shaking. "I saw it," he said, his voice thick. "When she put it on today, I saw it, and I knew it was Nana's, and I didn't say anything. I let her wear it because I didn't want to fight. I let her steal from us because I wanted peace." He looked at me, his eyes filling with tears. "I left you alone in the trenches, Hannah," he whispered. "I let them treat you like dirt because I wanted them to like me. I am so sorry." It was not a perfect apology. It did not erase the years of neglect, but it was real. "I know," I said softly. "But you didn't sign the paper. Logan, that is all that matters right now." "Hannah!" The sharp, shrill voice of my mother cut through the moment. Elaine Whitmore came rushing up the aisle, her face a mask of absolute horror. She did not look at Logan. She looked at me with a venom that was almost impressive. "What have you done?" she shrieked, grabbing my arm. "Do you have any idea what you have done? You have humiliated us. You have destroyed this family. Everyone is watching. The senator is watching. How could you be so cruel?" She was shaking, terrified not for her son's safety, but for her own social standing. She was mourning the loss of the status she thought she had finally secured. I looked at my mother. For years, her disapproval had been the gravity that held me down. But as I looked at her now, standing in the wreckage of her own vanity, I realized she was just a small, frightened woman who had bet on the wrong horse. I did not humiliate this family. "Mother," I said, my voice calm and final. "I prevented this family from becoming a headline in a federal fraud case. But the wedding," she stammered, "the guests—" "The wedding was a heist," I said, "and the guests are just witnesses." I gently removed her hand from my arm. I did not shove her. I just disconnected. "Go home, Mom," I said. "Take Logan home. He needs a mother right now, not a social coordinator." I turned away from her. I looked at Gavin in the booth one last time. He gave me a salute. I nodded. I walked toward the exit. The guests parted from me like the Red Sea. They did not whisper. They did not sneer. They looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. I was no longer the girl who didn't fit in. I was the woman who owned the building. I was the woman who had burned the kingdom down to save the prince. I stopped at the double doors and looked back. Logan was standing there, watching me leave. He looked lost, but he was free. I walked back to him, just for a second. I needed to say one last thing. I needed him to understand why I had done it this way, why I hadn't just called him quietly, why I had to do it on the stage. "I don't need them to respect me, Logan," I said, loud enough for the people in the front row to hear. "And I don't need you to like me. I just need you to live your own life before they sell it for parts." I turned and walked out into the humid Charleston night. The air smelled of rain and exhaust fumes, but to me, it smelled like victory. I checked my phone. I had a board meeting at 8 in the morning. I had a company to run. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening while driving, cooking, or maybe just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments below. I love reading your stories. If you enjoyed seeing justice served cold, please make sure to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people. See you in the next episode.